All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope you're excited about this video series, as excited as I am. This is the first of hopefully what I hope to be many conversations that we have with men in the community. And before I get into introducing our first guest, I want to talk about what this is, what the Community Fathers video series is, and some of the pillars that we stand on. And then we're going to get into talking to my host, who I'm very excited to talk about it. I'm sure that you guys are going to be excited to meet him as well. So let's talk about what the Community Fathers video series is. You know, in every community, there are men quietly carrying wisdom, discipline, and purpose, men whose lives can light the way for others who feel lost and powerless or disconnected. Through the Community Fathers video series, we're sitting down with these everyday leaders to uncover their habits, their mindsets, and the strategies that help them lead their families and serve their communities well. Our mission is simple: is to share these powerful conversations with men who may be struggling to find direction, purpose, and strength. By hearing from men like today's guest, Luther Hall, who've walked the path of growth, sacrifice, and faith, we aim to mentor and uplift others into their rightful place as fathers, role models, and builders of strong communities. So this is more than a video series. This is a movement to restore purpose, brotherhood, and leadership among men. And so we hope going forward that many more of you will join in this conversation. So I want to start by talking about the three principles that we stand on. We stand on a solution-driven a brotherhood, which is like a solution-oriented mindset. And let me just tell you something about that. You know, we highlight men who don't just talk about what's wrong, but they take ownership and lead forward. We believe that strong communities are built by men who reframe problems as opportunities for growth. They take personal responsibility for change, ask forward thinking, constructive questions. They stay grounded in faith and optimism, and they stay committed to growth in knowledge, habits, and mindset. The second pillar is the strength of brotherhood. I believe that in the AV, we have everything we need right here. You know, our stories remind us that no one builds alone. We thrive by connecting, encouraging, and learning from others. In each episode, men model how brotherhood works. Um, some of the bullets in the strength of brotherhood is sharing life giving habits and hard won strategies, supporting each other with time, presence, and action, showing up, stepping in, and doing work together. And here's an important one: being vulnerable, sharing openly about one's life challenges and failures to strengthen trust and healing. The last one is mentorship, because ultimately what we want to do is facilitate workshops with men and with groups of men and have conversations with group of men who are really struggling in a lot of areas. Some men who have had their families taken away, some men who have walked away from their families. But through mentorship, we want to lead by example, we want to uplift with truth, and we want to walk through the journey together with it. We believe every man has something to teach and something to learn. Mentoring in the Community Father series is not about perfection, it's about presence. So, and some of the bullets are: we speak truth with compassion, we offer guidance without judgment, and living out what we share side by side. So I just wanted to share those things so that you'll know the principle that we're standing on as we begin to open up in conversation. So today I want to introduce our guest speaker, a man that I've had a privilege of. I met him on the basketball court. And it's none other than my brother here, Luther Hall. Luther, go ahead and just say hello to everyone real quick.
Hey, I just want to say hello to the world and to the World Wide Web, and this is a great opportunity to speak with you about community fathers. And you said something in your intro that I want to touch on before we get further, and I lose that thought.
Okay.
You talked about mentorship, and where I think a lot of men get wrong is that they get a certain age and they feel they outgrow being able to be mentored. They feel when they hear mentorship, they figure it's a young old man talking to a young child, or mentoring somebody younger
Right.
than them. And I
Right.
think that translation gets lost. You know, Even at my age, in my 40s, I could still accept and get mentored and things going on in my life. So I really want, if they don't take away anything from our conversation, don't ever think you outgrow mentorship and guidance. Like that is a lifelong journey. You don't know it all. You're not going to have it all. And there's somebody out there who can fill in that blank for you to help you complete your sentence and keep your journey going. So if y'all don't take away anything from that, don't think you outgrow being able to be mentored.
Well said, sir. Well said. In the other video series I got going on called the Village Project, the last pillar is the commitment to continuous learning, and that's basically what you're saying. Learning is you never outgrow learning. And to me, the person is blessed who finds a learning opportunity in everything, in the people they meet, in the experiences they have. There's always something to learn. And thank you for sharing that. You know, uh, just a couple of things about Luther. He's a father. He's a husband. He's a father of three, two grown daughters, and a 9-year-old son.
Sure.
Correct me if I get anything wrong. He was born into a military family with a solid foundation of God and faith, and he's an active member of the armed forces. But before I get into conversation with him, I just kind of want to share a little bit of my experiences with this man. You know, um, I played basketball, basically pickup basketball my entire life. When you're 6'3", it's almost like you don't really have any other choice but to play basketball. So I found but my father was not one that pushed sports. So I never really kind of got the fundamentals down, but I was a hustler, and one of my good friends, Ron Whipple, point guard, he could tell you that one of my main plays was just running straight to the basket for the layup. And that was
Yep.
really the one play that I had in my arsenal. But when I played with Luther, you know, and let me just say this real quick. I did have moments of brilliance on the basketball court, but they
Absolutely.
were far and few in between. What I noticed about Luther is just about every time he stepped on the court, he was having moments of brilliance. It just seemed to be the norm with him. And so through this conversation, I'm hoping that we can find out what his secret was. But here's something too that I got to bring out. You know, I thoroughly enjoyed playing with this man because he had the utmost respect for everyone, his opponents and the people that he played with. As good as he was, he could have easily had this high and mighty attitude and kind of looked you up and down, like, what are you doing on the same court with him? But he never had that. I never felt that way playing with him. In fact, I always felt like I was one of the greatest players on earth when I stepped on the court with him. Even when I played against him, the respect that I was shown just made me feel like a better man. And I think that the men who are listening to this, who played with you, would totally agree with what I'm saying. It's just something about your character, man, that you bring out the best in people because of the respect that you have for people. And it's what leaders are made of. It's
Thank you.
that attribute of your character is something that I hope shines and reflects in my business. I hope that everybody that comes through and meets community fathers have that same type of feeling that I felt when I met you. So, without further ado, let's get started, man. Can you tell us what it was like growing up in a military, like with military like discipline?
Oh, wow. Well, first thing that comes to word, you just said it. First thing come to mind is discipline.
Yeah.
Our dad, the regiment of military, the expectations of do your part. Me and my brothers, we grew up with that. Day in and day out. Your room clean. Are you getting good grades in school? You know, it was just always a level of expectation to make sure we were doing our part. Around the house, in school, out in the community. You spoke of treating everybody. The respect level I had, like I think I make this joke all the time. I think me and my brothers knew yes sir and no sir and yes ma'am and no ma'am before we knew mom and dad.
Uh-huh.
And it's just been a foundation, in my life. And you know, yeah, it's just discipline, the regimen, holding being held accountable for all your actions, regardless of your age.
Mm.
You learned how to conduct yourself in public. Respect your elders within the household. Grandmama, we had our big mamas back then. Yes ma'am, no ma'am. you know we weren't allowed to say yeah or what to our adults. Yes ma'am, no ma'am, no sir, or just no. It was always making sure that as children we knew our place,
Yeah.
within the household structure. My dad made sure that structure was in our place. God, him, my mom, and then the children fell underneath. And he never let anyone or anybody disrupt that structure.
Yeah.
And that's what I remember the most and I appreciate the most, because that's how, I run my household. And it keeps everything in line, it keeps everything straight, and it keeps the flow of communication um going, and be able to communicate and talk about things. And there's a respect level because everybody's role and responsibility is defined within the household.
Yeah. A lot of us, when we think, for those of us who didn't grow up in a military home, when we think about growing up in that type of environment, we think that even the kids are waking up at the crack of dawn. When I think about you and your brother Sid, who's also a beast on the basketball court, e-
Yes.
even more so. I mean, but
No, you're right. He's my favorite player.
yeah,
Sid
yeah.
is my GOAT.
Yeah. Speaking of Sid, man, whenever I played with him, I didn't walk away with high self-esteem, man, because this dude just made you feel like you shouldn't be on the same basketball court with me. And he never
100%.
he never disrespected. It's not like he disrespected me. It was just his dominance. His dominance alone did that. And so,
100%.
but yeah, much love for Sid. Hopefully we can get him as a guest on this show, man. But
Say less.
um so most of us who didn't grow up in a military style family, we thinking you guys are waking up at the crack of dawn, you guys are doing push-ups every hour and stuff like that. Was there any of that type of stuff going on?
Honestly, no, and that's a very huge stereotype of military families. Don't get me wrong; there probably are military men and women who structure their household like that. But you know, like I said, just the discipline, accountability, helping around the house. One thing my dad didn't play. Our mom, the queen of the house, she don't touch trash.
Mm-hmm.
We take the trash now. She'll put her trash up.
Yeah, yeah.
Because she's a clean woman. But taking the trash out to the curb, taking the trash out to the dumpster, and things like that. My dad didn't play that. I got three boys in my house. Y'all make sure y'all take that trash out. Even when he deployed, don't let my mom tell him on a phone call when he called home to check on the house that she had to take the trash out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I run my house. My wife, unless I'm deployed, she don't touch the trash. And even when I was deployed, my dad believes in that so much because he was a ROTC instructor and head basketball coach at Lancaster High School. On
Mm-hmm.
trash days, on his way to school, he would come by and pull my trash cans to the curb for my wife
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
his daughter-in-law. That's how much he
Wow.
believed, in that, that the
Yeah.
queen of the house does not touch trash.
Yes.
And that's lifelong. Like this man, one of our core values in the Army is selfless service. On
Yes.
his way to work, he took an extra route to come take my trash cans to the curb while I was deployed to make
Uh-huh.
sure my wife didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
And, and like I said in our previous conversation, my hero, my my role model was in the home, and I get it, kids have to look for sports heroes, because dad's not there for whatever reason. I judge nobody's situation.
Yeah,
But, like I said, like I told you before, I don't even call my dad. I call him legend. My legend, you know, I mean, even to this day, he's just legendary. Like, I mean,
yeah,
how many people I really can say that out there that while they was out of town, their dad took time out of their day to come pull their trash cans to the curb for their wife,
yes,
and that's just, yeah, it's just unbelievable. But yeah, but growing up in a military household, like it's just, accountability. If you want one word to describe our family structure, faith and accountability.
yeah. I appreciate that you brought out the fact that your dad was like your role model and your biggest influence and your hero. Can you tell us, do you know anything about the way he was raised?
Absolutely. Two-parent household. His my grandpa Melvin, he was Air Force as well. He was prior military. And I mean, you see it when we went there from North Carolina, when we went home for family reunions. As soon
Uh-huh.
as he came in the house, he has several siblings. There's a couple twins in his bloodline, and it was the same thing when they went home. They took out the trash. And I'm talking about grown men, grown military men. My auntie, grown women. They went to the house. They still did their chores. They took out the trash. Like, once you home, like I told you, that structure, God, the father of the household, the mother and the children, no matter
Uh-huh.
how old we are and how old my dad gets, that structure never left. They got home, family reunion, everybody having fun, even with us there,
Uh-huh.
even with their kids there. They took out the trash still. If the lawn needed to be cut, they got out there and cut it.
Mhm.
It was just, there was no break in service when it came to roles and responsibility of the household.
Okay. Appreciate that, man. And more of that is needed. You know,
100%.
to hear that your father drives by when you're not there to make sure your wife doesn't have to take out the trash can. That to me, that is something that should just be like the norm with men,
Agreed.
you know. And so yes, that type of leadership and example is so needed. Um, I wanted to ask you about
Yes,
your
sir.
military experience.
So,
First of all, what rank are you, and what branch of service are you in?
I'm in the Army. Right now, I am a captain. Getting ready to pin major here in a little bit, and my current job is I am a company commander in a tactical psychological operations unit, based out of St. Louis.
Hmm. Okay. And so, what's the biggest thing you think you've kind of gotten from from your experience in the service? And you're still in, by the way.
Still in. So yeah, I'll be 16 years in October. The biggest thing I've learned is, hmm, how military and sports are more alike than you think.
Uh huh.
I mean, you've been around the game, yourself, and you have to realize that everybody is not the same. And
Uh
what I
huh.
mean by that, like me, my dad being military and being held accountable, I was the type of player and the type of soldier
All right.
that, you can yell at me, hey, we need to get this done, and I respond.
Mm-hmm.
Some players and some soldiers, you have to pull them aside and they need that more one-on-one mentor. Everybody doesn't respond well to the public criticism or the ridicule in front of their peers.
Uh huh.
So, just being able to adapt, there we go, being able to adapt my leadership style is one of the biggest things, that I've taken away from it. And honestly, it's helped me with my parenting. I'm
Uh
able
huh.
to identify the moments where, I need to be stern with my children, or the moments I need to, like, you know what, I need to be more nurturing in this situation to
Uh
help them
huh.
get through, and then, you know, drive home the lesson afterwards, after we, get through whatever they're going through, and getting them back, emotionally stable to where they
Uh-huh.
can, accept the teachings that I need to give, whatever that particular situation has brought to them.
Okay. All right. And before we get into your parenting, I did want to talk about your season in bodybuilding. I know you did that for a while.
Yes, sir.
can you tell us how did that transpire?
Yeah, so absolutely. So shout out to Miss Ruby. She's phenomenal. So she saw me working out at 24-hour fitness one day,
Mm-hmm.
and she approached me and said, "You ever thought about, competing in men's physique?" And I was like, "Nah, I mean, I just stayed in shape because, I played basketball and, military, one of our foundations is, being ready to deploy and
Uh-huh.
making sure your medical readiness. So, I just make sure I stayed in shape for that. And then, so, yeah, she said, well, I want you on my team. I want you to do this physique competition with me. And so I did it, went through the, trained hard and ate right. And, as you can see the pictures, I got pretty lean and was able to go out there and take third in my first competition ever. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, it was a great time. It was fun. My wife came out there supporting. My brother came out there. It was in San Diego, and I just had a great time. And yeah, I mean, it's a unique experience. It was funny. You see these guys compete, these guys and women compete,
Uh-huh.
and you see them so exhausted after the competition. You're like,
Right.
you're just posing like, why are you so exhausted?
Uh-huh.
But the prep and the leading up to the competition, you're barely eating. You're just drinking sips of water because, as you can see, you need to lean out as much as possible so all your muscles and your physique really show. And I'm telling you, I think my wife said, like, I wasn't in the car 5 minutes on our way to a restaurant to eat. I was knocked out sleep. Like, you're
Uh-huh.
just, the posing, going back and forth on the stage, changing
Uh-huh.
clothes, like, yeah, it's grueling, and that's why they take it serious. They get their sponsors, and yeah, it's a grueling and very expensive sport to be in.
Uh-huh. Wow. Yes. It sounds, man. It sounds. But what would make you even make that decision? Most people probably would have shied away from that. You know.
uh, well, first and foremost, Ruby is a good saleswoman,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and
Okay.
and one thing I try to do is have as few regrets as possible.
Uh-huh.
So for me, it was a why not moment. Like, you
Okay.
come to the gym every day anyway. You train every day. Why not? Give it
Yeah.
a try. You
Yeah.
like it, cool. If you don't, cool. At least you can look in the mirror and say you tried it. And
Uh-huh.
it's an experience that, it's something I did. Now, look, you and I are talking about experience that I had, and I get to share it with you and anybody else who, looking to get into physique or bodybuilding. I'm not
Uh-huh.
saying I'm the greatest at it, but I can either A, give you some advice, or B, point you in the right direction because of the great people I've met in the fitness community that,
Right.
that do this on a day in and day out and year to year basis.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. Later on, we will be asking you about, some nutritional tips and maybe even some exercise um, tips as well. I do want to have this one question before I talk a little bit more about basketball. Did you follow a strict diet, or do you still follow a strict diet?
When I was gearing up for the competition, very strict, high protein, low carbs.
Uh
And
huh.
then, like, the last week going into the competition, it was strictly no carbs.
Hmm.
You wanted to dry out as much as possible. And my diet is still pretty strict. If you had to base it on a scale of 100, I'm probably like a 90-10. 90% of my diet is pretty healthy. Some of it, sometimes you just want a Burger King, or you want to, shoot and grab some tacos or something. So I leave that. I have that room, obviously, to obviously I'm not in a fitness competition anymore, but I leave that room to enjoy life, as they like to say, or cheat meals or whatever, things like that. So, but I would say for the most part, like I said, it's about a 90-10 split. I still eat pretty healthy and pretty clean.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to basketball. Um, the guy that I saw play had something special about him. And so I wanted to find out from you what kind of mindset allowed you to have the type of consistent talent that you had.
Fear,
Say that again.
fear,
Okay.
fear. Once I really started getting serious about basketball, I truly had one fear. And that
Uh-huh.
fear was every day I didn't do something to get better, somebody else is. And when I met them on the court, they were going to dominate me.
Uh-huh.
And my thing was, if we met on the court and you got the best of me and that was your day, I can tip my hat to you and just say, hey, it was your day. I can shake your hand and go about it, go about my day, knowing that I was prepared. You just outplayed me that day.
Yeah, yeah,
And like I said, I worked on my game every day religiously. Like I still, when I go back home, I still got old teammates. Oh man, I wish I'd have did what you did. When we was going out partying and having fun.
yeah.
You was going to the gym working on your game. Like I BS you not, my whole high school career, I went to one prom. And that's because a senior invited me.
Uh-huh.
I just, I knew what I wanted out of life and out of my basketball career. Now, mind you, everybody's goal, if you pick up a basketball, majority of people pick up any sport, their goal is to reach the pinnacle. Obviously,
Uh-huh.
for the basketball players, NBA.
Yeah.
And, and every now and then, people ask me, do I try to make the NBA? Absolutely, I did. And they say, are you upset that you didn't make it? And my answer is always no. One, because I did my part. Two, my faith in God gave me peace because, yeah, son, you did great things and you played basketball, but that's not the path I have for you,
Yeah, yeah.
you know? And I'm 100% okay with that. I got beautiful children out my path. I got a beautiful wife. I got a beautiful military career. I'm sitting here talking to you right now, hopefully building something great in our community. Like, you know, it was easy to accept my journey and my calling,
Yeah.
because I have faith. And like I said, I put in my work. And I told God, I did my part. You let me know what you want to do, and I still got to see great things. I played in Ukraine, I played in Germany,
Uh-huh.
I played in Mexico. I was all Army. When I joined the Army, I made all Army basketball, and I
Uh-huh.
got to play basketball with then President Barack Obama. Like I literally shook that man's hand and shared a basketball court with him,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's just some experiences that people will never have in their life.
Uh-huh.
So to me, my career wasn't a failure because I didn't make the NBA.
Right.
I've still seen great things and done great things through the grace of God. And like I said, I have peace because I did my part.
Yes.
I did my part, and God says, no, I have a different career path for you. This is what I need you to do, and this is where you're needed, son. And and I accept that journey, Father.
That's great, man. And then I even told you in our last conversation that your career definitely is not anything to be ashamed of, simply because of the inspiration that you have been to men in the Antelope Valley. I can't talk to men anywhere about basketball without them bringing up your name. And
I'm still
so,
humbled by that.
yeah,
I still can't believe that.
yeah. So you made an impact in a way that you have no idea. You know that So I just want you to know, brother, you definitely had an impact
Thank
through
you.
your basketball game. You know, I let's see something. Oh, when you first said fear, because I wasn't expecting you to say fear. I thought to myself, Sid did that to him. But so can you tell us? Did you and him kind of go heads up a lot growing up?
Oh yeah. My mama that's her favorite stories when me and Sid used to battle. As soon as we came in the house, you go to your room, calm down, and and come back later. And it was just all competition, man.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and and raising our brother, he's the youngest. I don't know if you know, Sid is the youngest of three.
Okay.
So learning to play ball. Mercy wasn't allowed. Blocking his shot. If you ever watch Sid shoot, he has a high arc on the ball.
Uh-huh.
And that's because we used to block his shot. Me and my older brother, our dad used to block his shot.
Uh-huh.
Figure it out.
Yeah, yeah.
Figure it out. And he turned into, one of the best players I've ever played with in my life. Like people, I can really have a legit GOAT debate about NBA players without any emotion because my brother Sid is truly my GOAT.
Yeah.
Like you can give me everybody in their prime, Bron, Jordan, God rest his soul, Kobe, bring him back. You put us
Uh-huh.
in an open gym together. I'm picking Sid first and let the chips fall where they may.
All right. All
you
right.
know, and so yeah, countless battles, you know, with my brother, and you know, that's just yeah, you know, it's typical, you know, typical with that, you know, taking him everywhere I go to the gyms, and that's
Uh-huh.
another good thing about growing up military because our dad played ball. He was all Air Force.
Okay.
So when we go to the gym with him, you know, military is grown men in that gym. So
Yes.
me and my brother Sid been playing against grown men our whole life. And when we, you know, played in our tournaments and youth tournaments, we've always played up.
Yeah.
You know, our parents, you know, always put us, you know, in higher age groups because we've been playing with grown men. And the same thing on the military base. That, you know, these grown men getting up 8 o'clock in the morning to come to the gym. They're not gonna let you shoot.
Hmm.
There's 20 people ready to get on the court, and you know, loser, you know, you go back on the list. You got to go, you know, write your name down on the
Yeah.
list. You
Right.
5 games down again if you
Okay.
lose. So they're
Uh-huh.
not letting no little kids come in there and shoot and do what they want because it's cute. So you know, me and Sid have been battle tested our whole lives and our whole careers. You know, in terms of playing the game of basketball. So you know, it's yeah, but yeah, give me my brother all day and we'll let the chips fall where they may.
All right. It sounds like you guys made each other better.
100%.
Yeah.
One last story I'll share. I remember him. I don't know if you ever watched Sid's left-handed,
Hmm.
and I'm
Hmm.
right-handed. And one
Okay.
day we played a game of 21, but you had to score with your opposite hand.
Mm.
Let me tell you, that was the longest 2 hours of 21
All
we
right.
ever played in our lives because you know working on your opposite hand, you knew what hand he was going to shoot with, so it's easier to play defense. But you know, those are them battles and things that just you know that made you better. You know, going
Uh-huh.
further and you know, and just you know, sports just teach you about life. You know, adversity, figuring it out. You know,
Yeah.
doing something different. You know, okay, he cut that off. Let me go this way to see if I can get success. And you know, that's what life is.
Yeah.
A roadblock could come up, or you know. You're about to go out of town and your car breaks down. You know, it just life just throws them hurdles at you, and you know, and you got to rely on your faith and your adaptability to overcome. And you know, and that's what sports teach you. You know, I mean, your
Yeah.
coach can draw up the greatest game plan ever, but you didn't expect number 22, who's the eighth man on the bench, to come off the bench and catch fire. And now you're having to guard him or her on the perimeter because you know you didn't game plan for them, but
Yeah.
you know, now they're a new situation for you and you have to adapt, you know, your game plan, you know, to that particular player and, you know, and try to come out with there with the victory. And that's what life is, you know,
Yeah.
having faith and trusting yourself. And, you know, when those hurdles do come up, you know, being able to have that adaptability to still, you know, accomplish the mission and get to your goal.
Yeah. You know what? I actually want to reiterate what you just said. Anybody that's got any aspirations to be great at basketball, what Luther just said about playing an entire game with your offhand, it to me would be the best way to make you that much of a deadlier player. You know, and my most of my success on the basketball court came as a coach. Luther, I don't know if you knew this about me, but I started coaching at the middle school level,
Okay.
and it was all we were always in the top three. But I at Amargosa Creek Middle School, our team went on a run for several years. We dominated all the way up until 2020. You know, for about 5 or 6 years, always in the championship.
Nice.
And so that's why I recognize that strategy that you talk about. I wish that was something that I had thought of. You got to play with your offhand for an entire game of 21. That would have just helped our guys get better. So I appreciate you sharing that. One the last thing about basketball. How young were you when you decided that you wanted to be as good as you were going to be?
Uh, well, growing up in Texas, everybody touched a football.
Uh
So I would
huh.
say seventh grade. I was dual sports up to seventh grade,
Okay.
and you know, and then once I hit seventh grade, I made the decision like, you know, okay, nah, you know, basketball is where you know where I wanted to, you know, where I really wanted to focus on. So you
Uh-huh.
know, so I would say about seventh grade is when I took the pads off and just really focused on strictly basketball.
Uh-huh. And is that the same time where you made the decision that you were going to be as good as you were as well? Or did that come a little later?
I would say that I was so because like I said, playing with the grown men all the time. Uh, I relied so much on what I knew naturally, just playing with older men at the
Yeah,
gym. So I would say about ninth grade, because as they say, as you go up in age and get older, the really the skills and the speed and everything that you had advantage of over when you were younger, everybody's catching up now.
yeah,
So I would say ninth grade is where I realized, okay, going to practice with my team a couple hours a day is not going to cut it. What am I going to do on my own to separate myself and make sure that I'm still the cream of the crop and I'm still a relevant player whenever I put my jersey on
right.
and play? So I would say about ninth grade is where I was like, okay, nah, you need to be doing more. Just come to practice a couple days with your team is, it's not enough. Everybody in here can run. Everybody in here can jump. Everybody in here can shoot. And some of them are doing it better than you right now. If I'm going to be, transparent. So like you and I had in our previous conversation, and one thing my dad always drilled home in us, and one of the things I so respect about you and your game is no coach, no trainer, no anybody. I don't care if you're a student in school and you just want to focus on your grades. Nobody should have to coach effort.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
can get your left hand good. I can get your right hand good. I can get you stronger. I can, if I was a teacher, I can give you the materials, to get smarter in a particular subject. But I should not have to coach your effort and your want to.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's the things I'm instilling in my son. He loves soccer. Don't coach effort.
yeah,
You make a mistake, you miss a kick, you miss a goal. Cool, we can correct that. We can go back to the drawing board and fix
uh-huh.
your game. But I'll be more disappointed if a coach or a trainer tells me that Landon doesn't play hard.
Yeah,
That's what, or his teachers, one of the biggest compliments, Landon's always prepared for class. He comes ready to learn.
uh-huh.
That is 90% of the battle, Hodges.
Yeah, yeah,
Coming ready to work, and that's why people and kids, they hate preseason. Preseason, because all of this is running, getting in
yeah,
shape. But what coach is doing, he's taking the physical aspect out of it so he can teach you what he or she needs to teach you during the season. The season's not a time to get in shape. You need to come in shape, ready to work so we can run our plays,
yeah.
scrimmage. You can't do that when you're tired. If you're tired, you're more focused on catching your breath than me telling you you're supposed to be setting a back screen here.
Right.
And so that preparation,
Uh-huh.
is where it's at.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. And basically, you kind of just killed two birds with one stone with sharing that because when I think about this generation of young boys, they're facing two challenges that I see most often. First one is making a decision. A lot of them really, they just do whatever they see people around them doing, and they haven't
Yes.
really made an internal decision. But the second one, which is even more important, is deciding the type of person you're going to be to achieve your goals.
Yeah.
And so that's why I asked you about basketball. When did you make the decision to play? And then when did you make the decision to be as good as you were? And so and young men, they need to learn to choose early what it is you want. But now you got to decide on the character you're going to have because now that, and you kind of brought this up earlier, you were talking about some of the greats, and I want to kind of redirect our conversation to just mention people that we both respect, have the utmost respect for Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. There was no work ethic that I know of like his, and even Magic, who I grew up. That was more my era. I just love. I mean, you just love these guys that came to the court and they excelled at their craft. They
Yes.
gave the people what they want. But there was this one aspect of their life where we've kind of all seen it, and it's kind of a shame when you're a public person because what happens when you fail, that's public as well. But I do want to address that because I think it's important. And watching the Kobe docu series, I see that he made a decision early on. I'm going to be the greatest basketball player in the world.
Yeah.
He said these things early. I'm going to go straight out of high school, and then it came to pass. So he gets a pat on the back for that. He gets accolades for that. Um, my question is, when we find out about the failure, what what could have been done to avoid that? And I'm not looking for anybody to be perfect, but I do think that there's a way for young men to avoid those pitfalls. Do you have any
Mhm.
advice on that?
Well, as you and I both know, our kids in general are growing up in different times.
Yes,
You
yes,
know, you know, just I'll use me for an example. We'd have a high school basketball game on Friday, and Saturday maybe, but definitely Monday, you didn't really see how your peers did until the newspaper came out.
yeah, uh-huh.
And now everything for these kids is real time.
Hmm.
And you know, and what I've, you know, one thing I would tell the kids today, I would say 98% of social media is entertainment. You cannot live your life based off of that.
Hmm.
You know, I guarantee you, your favorite artist, whatever you see them flossing, 9 times out of 10 is rented. It's borrowed. As soon as the camera cuts off, they're giving their chain back. They're handing back the keys to their car. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying they're not living comfortably. There are some very successful people out there, but majority of the people that our kids are seeing are not living that really type of lifestyle day in and day out. And my advice would be find a solid foundation in the real. I'm not saying don't enjoy social media. I'm not saying don't use it as entertainment. Some of it could be even inspirational. I'm not gonna sit there and just completely dog social media, but you know, like you talked about in your soliloquy when you opened up that mentorship. Find someone real that's even if they don't live the lifestyle that you want, I guarantee you there's lessons in what they've learned, how they got to where they got. Like I forgot who said it, but like even and I use this term lightly, you know, but even a homeless person or a bum can teach you life lessons. You know why? Because somewhere along the line they derailed, and now they're in the situation that they're in. Most people walk by them and look down upon them. But I guarantee you, if you sat down and talked to some of them, there is some wisdom there because they've had a hard knock life and they're still living it. And there is wisdom there. Now whether you get a chance to tap into it and have a real conversation with them, that's a different story. But everybody has, like you said again in your soliloquy earlier, everybody has something to give if you give them time a chance to give it to you.
All right. Appreciate that. Just my little input on that, on how we can help young people avoid pitfalls. And this is something that I'm just learning just in the last couple of years, Luther. So I'm not claiming to be the authority on living right, but what I've learned, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, you have to make a decision on the type of character you want, and
Yeah.
you got to do it early. And sometimes that means making a decision to give up some of the things that you like,
Yeah.
you know. And because I'm a man of faith, daily I find myself submitting my desires to the sovereign King. I submit my plans. I submit my eyes. Because it's so easy when you're walking out in the street, especially in the summertime, and you see these women walking by. Your eyes could just go. But I've made a decision. I'm gonna submit all of that to the Lord. And so, and I'm not saying it's easy, but it's
Yeah.
a choice that I make daily. And I think that that's something that we can really instill in young people, not just to make a decision on what you want to do, but make a
Yeah.
decision on who you're going to be, and try to get those characters that matches that.
Yeah. And I think you said something that sparked a thought. And not to be counter, I don't think we could ever avoid help kids avoid pitfalls.
Uh-huh.
I think our job is to help give them tools to equip, to handle pitfalls. A
Yes.
lot of these kids, their new phrase, crash out. A lot of these kids, once a mistake is made, it's the end all. They are ready to go from 0 to 100 on something that if you just slow down and talk to somebody, they probably can give you a different course of action and help buffer whatever negative impact, whatever you did,
Yeah.
help give you a buffer for that negative consequence and help you get through it. But these kids go from 0 to 100 so quick because
Yeah.
we're not doing a good job of giving them, equipping them with things, and tools to help them deal with them type of situations.
Yeah.
Like I was sharing with you, my brother Kelly, you know, me and my son, whenever I give him a ride to school, we pray every morning. We have a prayer podcast we listen to.
Hmm.
And one day I just caught him in prayer and I just took a picture and I posted it on Facebook, and he was like, it's so funny. These parents, as soon as they find out their kid is fast or can dribble or can run a football, we're so quick to put them in a sport to feed into that talent. But why are we waiting so long as parents to introduce God into their daily regimen?
Okay.
And that was just it was so simple, but it was so profound. Like, dang, you think about like, oh, they got plenty of time to grow into their faith, or they got plenty of time to do that. And then by the time they're 16, 17, 18, they're out there in the streets making terrible choices because we nurtured, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but we didn't prioritize God early enough in their life.
Right. That's well said, sir. Kind of want to go back just to one thing you was talking about earlier about don't try to prevent your children from failing, because a lot of times the lessons that they learn in life come through failing. So as
100%.
parents, we have to be thoughtful in taking that risk that will put our kids in a place where they can potentially fail, and then allow it, because that's really the only place that they can learn. And then what you said about why do we wait so long to introduce God, and I know for me, and what you see, all the things you see me doing is kind of the fruit of my mom's labor. She received the Lord when she was incarcerated, and soon after she got out, she had me, and she started having kids. And what she immediately did was she would every night, every night we sit around her and she teach us these Bible lessons. So from growing up, that's all I remember, taking us to church. And that just made such a profound impact on my life, her doing that. And so that was all I knew,
Yeah.
you know? So yeah, I agree with you. Don't wait so long to introduce God to your children.
Yes.
Yes. So as far as your parenting, um, did you have any challenges or failures early on?
Absolutely. Challenges, of course. My first two children are daughters, are girls. So, uh, not ever, and I'm not going to ever sit here and say I was perfect, I got perfect, but having girls really made me check myself on how I was treating women. If we're going to be transparent,
Okay.
uh, you know, basketball star,
Yes.
local legend, whatever labels you want to call it,
Mhm.
all Luther's here, or got Luther's number after the game, and just like, and the things I was doing, maybe like, you know, if your daughter came home and said the dude she was dealing with was doing the crap you doing, what would your reaction be?
Mhm. Yes.
And and that was a huge reality check.
Mhm.
Now, am I gonna sit here and tell you that I changed my behavior overnight? No. I'm not gonna lie to you like that.
Right.
But it started a foundation and a change within me,
Mhm.
definitely on how I, treated, the women in my life, the women I dealt with, because like I said, you know, you talk tough and you and oh, I'm a player, yeah, yeah, yeah. But your daughter come home with that heartbreak, and you realize she's dealing with a dude who acts just like you. Now you're like, what do you say? Yeah, you're basically being a hypocrite as a parent. Oh, baby, it's okay. And then as soon as you go to sleep and comfort her, now you back doing your thing. Now you do the very same thing you try to warn her against, and it just became an eternal conflict of interest. So I'll say that was my biggest challenge uh, in parenting, and I'll say my failure. I wouldn't say I had failures. I would say moments of not moments, continued growth.
Mm-hmm.
Continued growth. You see why you hear all these people talking about parenting books and all that. There's no book for parenting.
Right, right.
There's no book for parenting, and it's what they call it OJT, on the job training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Parenting is serious OJT, and especially like I said, nowadays, man, what worked for you and I, might not work for the women and men who are having children nowadays. Like I said, it's a whole different dynamic of what these children are being raised in. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I had my daughters are solid, my son is solid. And while we're on this subject, I want to give a huge shout out to my mother of my children.
Uh-huh.
Them, I have, my daughters are by from two different women, and my son is with my current wife. So all my children have, different mothers.
Yeah.
But one thing I do not have in my life is a baby mama.
Uh-huh.
And I don't let anybody call the mother of my children baby mama.
Mm-hmm.
And why? Because it's such a negative condensation or negative attachment in our community.
Yeah.
You can call them my ex, you can call them the mother of my children, your ex-wife, or I seen your children's mother here and there, but I don't let nobody call them baby mamas. One, out of respect for them. Two, them women have never given me baby mama issues. We've always communicated about our children. There's always been a mutual respect about our children.
Mm-hmm.
They never like, oh, tell me what your daddy doing at his house. Or, I
Mm-hmm.
never sent my daughters, oh, tell me what your mama doing at her house. We separated, went our separate ways. It was maturity and communication across the board.
Yeah.
And that's why I make sure them women are respected, regardless if we're done, romantically, or the case may be. I do not have baby mamas. And I can sincerely say, through my experience, that is a choice.
Um,
That is a choice that, men or women are making on how they want to deal with their significant other when the relationship ends. And
right.
9 times out of 10, it's because they are mad that the relationship ended,
Mm-hmm.
and they're using their children as a pawn to make it ugly and harder for the other person.
Yeah.
And so, and just going through that dynamic and making sure that they are respected, and they're getting their proper just due, because like I said, they are phenomenal women, phenomenal co-parents. And like I said, I don't have baby mamas in my life. I got tremendous co-parents and good friends when it comes to raising my children.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the more I hear you talk, the more it sounds like order starts within. Even
Yes,
when we talking about the community, set things in order, the way women are being treated, the way our daughters are being raised, all of that starts with the inside the individual decisions that as men we make,
100%.
and it begins to affect everyone around us.
100%.
So I
It,
thank you for
yeah.
sharing that.
And me and my brothers, we have a saying that
Uh-huh.
keeps us humble, and it keeps us on the path. And that saying is, I'm not gonna let you count on me if I can't hold you accountable.
Okay.
So if I'm gonna let you count on me to be there for you through thick and thin, when you mess up
Yes.
and and you don't do the right thing, I gotta be able to hold you accountable without you going left on me or crashing out on me when I call you out on your BS, because you're supposed to go right, but you went left.
Yes. That's it.
Now if you got in trouble for it, like I said, we'll do what we got to do to alleviate the situation. But when things reset, we're gonna talk about what you did and how it was wrong, and I'm gonna hold you accountable. If you're gonna count on me, to be there for you. It's gonna be for good or good or bad, for better or for worse. And and I think that's another thing. Like, we only wanna, when our brothers and our, people in the community are doing wrong, we rather turn our back instead of say, hey Hodges, hey bro,
Yeah.
that's not it.
Right, right.
That's not it. And not only that, I think a part of it is like, you don't know how let's be honest, we have a fear of how that person is going to accept that criticism.
Come on.
And that's twofold. Like, dang man, I see Hodges, he ain't going down right, but like, either A, none of my business, or B, he ain't gonna be crashing out on me, for trying to correct them. And I think that overall, that humility, just to hear your brother say, "Hey man, you got this one wrong, bro. Let's figure this out." You know what I'm saying? Or stop them before they go too far.
Yeah,
Hey, you're not at that critical point yet, but hey, I see it. Let's talk about it before it gets too crazy. And I think, just we're missing, another popular word nowadays, red flags. I think as men, we're missing a lot of the red flags, or ignoring the red flags that we see the men of our community showing us. And like I said, ain't my problem. He ain't coming to my house. I don't see him every day. And just being able to say, hey, you know what, Lou? Nah, bro, I know you. I see how you moving. That's not you. That's
yes,
not you. And anybody who listens to this, to our video, hold me accountable.
yes,
I have a standard about myself. If you ever see me moving left or right, and that's not me, hey, I give y'all any permission. If you truly care about me, you'll correct me.
yeah,
If you truly care about me, you'll correct me.
yeah,
And I just think, as men, we need to do a better learning that, or getting the acknowledgement that correction comes from love. Just like your parents disciplined you growing up, it's, I mean, you don't feel it when you're getting the whooping, but when you
mhm,
get older, their discipline was love, because they understood that the world's going to treat you harsher than I am in this household. And, I got to lay a foundation of discipline where if you mess up, there's going to be consequences. When you do good, there's going to be positive consequences. And I just think, we need to, like I said, don't outgrow mentorship, and just know that when somebody sees you going left, hopefully that that it's coming from a place of love, and they want to make sure that they're just bringing you back right, so you don't do anything silly to mess up your life, or, potentially somebody else's.
man, what you just described is really what Community Fathers is all about. Man, you sure you don't want to just be my permanent co-host? You know,
If if that's a genuine offer, I accept.
we okay, we'll talk. We'll
Yes,
talk.
sir.
But that was beautifully said, because that's exactly what this is about. You know, the last thing I want to be on here doing is browbeating men about their shortcomings.
Yes.
But I do want to hold them accountable from the standpoint of a brother
Yes.
that loves you. You know what I mean?
100%.
And so that was well said, man. And wow, yes, sir. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that.
Okay.
Um, Tell me about some of your habits. And I only got a couple more things. Before we get into this deep conversation about your habits and strategy, let's talk about some maybe a little bit kind of lighthearted. I wanted to ask you about your favorite movie.
Favorite
And
movie. Ooh. Ah. Favorite movie for me. Ooh, there's a few good ones out there. I'm a huge fan of the movie La Bamba.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
um, I would say sports movie. Either He Got Game or The Program. That's a football movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I'm a huge fan of Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick.
Okay.
But yeah, but they haven't put any good ones out lately. But my favorite genre movie is horror. I love horror films, but
Okay. Okay.
they failing us in that era. I mean, Sinners was pretty good. I went and saw that. Me and my wife went and saw that. But uh,
I
but
thought that
yeah,
was
I
good
would
too.
say my favorite two genres is comedy and horror.
Okay. All right.
Oh, and
Oh,
Above the Rim. Can't leave Above the Rim out.
all right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For some reason I figured you might say something like Gladiator or something, but
No, honestly, being in the military, I'm not a huge. military buff in terms of like
Okay.
movie and you
Okay.
know, I'm not definitely. I'm not a military historian. I learn. When I go to new units, I do learn what the foundation of that unit, what their unit patches me. I don't know if people know that, but like, when you see a military service member, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, whatever,
Yeah.
their patch has a heritage and it started somewhere. So I try to make sure at least at minimum when I go to a new unit or I'm a part of or I get attached to a new unit, I try to get some of their heritage, why that patch is on my left or right shoulder,
Yeah.
to give it more meaning and and to fill you apart and it shows that you care, at least about that. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to quote World War I or World War II, stats and things like that. Just, get a deep sense of the history of where you at and make the most of that time when you're with that unit, before you move on in your career.
All right, sir. That kind of brings me for me. I there was a man, and I hope to have him as a guest soon. But he grafted me into the Pasadena High School marching band, and I know that's for nerds, but that was important to me. And I just realized just this in the last few years that they got 100-year history. So I was part of a legacy.
Yes,
And the guy that I'm talking about, he shares pictures going all the way back to the early 1900s, regarding the Pasadena High School marching band. And so it just makes me feel even that much better that I was part of something
absolutely.
so strong. So I understand what you mean by that. So tell us some of the habits that you have as a man. What are some of your habits or strategies?
Uh, well, some of my habits, you know, for me, uh, and I mean, my dad preached it, but I'm an up early type guy. You know me, when I used to train Malcolm, we was at the gym at 1 in the morning.
Uh huh.
And, I do that for two reasons. One, I like waking up early, getting my day started. Two, it gives my wife a chance. We're a partnership. So, I go to gym from, 1 to 3 and she gets up, and does her thing, from 3 to 5 or whatever the case may be. And it's just a partnership that we built. Somebody's always here with our son, to watch our son. So, if I can get up early, give her a couple more hours of sleep, and, so she can go about her day, like I said, and you've been there before, man. There's just nobody there early in the gym. So,
Yeah.
you can be able to
Yes.
get your workout in, you can superset, you can go
Yeah.
get shots up, with a bunch of people in there. And like I told you before, when we had our personal conversation, that, there's different ways of tithing.
Uh huh.
You give 10% of your income, 10% of your time,
Hmm.
or any talents or gifts God has given you, sharing it with others, to enrich their life and hopefully, introduce God to them more. So I make sure I tithe the first 10% of my day. As
Okay.
soon as it sounds funny and I hope people take me serious, but as soon as I open my eyes, I'm in prayer Hodges.
Okay.
God did the hard part.
Yeah.
He did not have to wake me up that day,
Yeah.
and I make sure it is a prayer of thanks and of gratitude,
Hmm.
you know, and I make sure I tie 10% of my day belongs to him. Like I am praying throughout the morning, even when I get in the car drive to the gym. It's a prayer podcast. It's a Bible podcast. I'm doing something to bring me closer to him on a
Yeah.
daily basis. Just
Hmm.
like just like you said so eloquently, you make sure that you give everything to him in the morning, your eyesight, what you hear, what you speak, what you feel in your heart. You make sure that he has command over all of it to make sure that you stay as right as possible in
Yeah.
your journey, in your walk.
Hmm.
And, we mirror each other in that. I just make sure that my 10% belongs to him first. And it just sets the tone for my day. It sets the tone how I interact with my wife. It sets the tone how I interact with my children, my
Hmm.
co-workers, my soldiers. It just sets that tone of grace, humility and mercy, and that, that we're all in this together. And, yes, I am the head of the household and I have a God-fearing wife that believes that, but she knows 1,000,000% her opinion is valued. You know what I'm saying? It's not a, my way or no way, she's intelligent. She's,
Right.
one of the smartest people I know, to be honest with you. And being transparent, she saved me financially.
Uh huh.
She saved me financially and and that's part of I was saying, like, just a quick testimony.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and sharing, sharing gifts. Her gift is finances.
Mm-hmm.
And, when we got married and we were renting and we knew eventually we wanted to buy a home,
Mm-hmm.
my credit was terrible. My
Okay.
credit was terrible. And, she dealt with banking her whole life and she dealt with mortgage. She said, give me your bills, give me all your bills. And she put me on a budget. And I would say within 6 months to a year, she took my credit from high fives, low sixes to where I'm pushing 789 now.
Uh-huh.
And that's because of her.
Yeah.
And, and again, that's just her sharing her gift of finances, that, improved my life. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's it, my strategy. Once I give God that 10%, he has control of the rest of my day. And that's not to say that I don't have, trials and tribulations, bad days, or hurdles that I come up against, but also know that I'm not easily moved because I know God is still in control regardless of what I face.
Yeah. That's man, that's awesome. And it's, you know, yeah, it just sounds like you have a blessing in your life.
100%.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't want to go on about my wife because she's done similar things for me and still is. The fact that she's allowing me to do what I'm doing
Yes.
has been a blessing.
100%.
Um, Last thing I want to ask you about, because this conversation has been lengthy, which is fine with me, but because I've enjoyed every minute of it. But the last thing I
Likewise.
wanted to ask you about was your ministry. What do you look at as your ministry, and tell us about it?
I would say my ministry for me is through fitness. I think, in playing sports and, I've met so many people that I've been able to share my journey with and my relationship with God with, even to our conversation, we met via basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And, just like I said earlier in the beginning, yes, I'm like every other kid who picked up a ball. My goal was the NBA. And like I said, I have no regrets because I gave the game my all. I had faith and I accomplished great things. But, I just think my ministry for me is just to bring as many people as close to God as possible through sports, athletics, working out, and even, as a commanding officer, United States Army, I tell my soldiers, they ask me my leadership style. I lead with grace. I'm firm, but I lead with grace. Mistakes will be made, mishaps will happen, and but there will always be a level of grace and humility in how I interact and treat people, and that's that just comes from having a relationship with God because you and I both know we're here because of His grace and His mercy. The wages of sin is death, but you and I have air in our lungs talking to each other.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. Very powerful. I have to thank you, man, for sharing and being as transparent as you have been. And I really appreciate this conversation.
Thank
And you have been so transparent and clear about not just who you are, but your failures, your successes. And I hope that this is inspiring to men to be brave enough to share about their lives.
yeah,
Because the truth of the matter is we all need each other.
we
And
do.
this is just one of the vehicles and one of the ways that we can do that through conversation, through being vulnerable with each other, through talking, and just, I always thought, my father died before he turned 60. And I always thought he would have done a whole lot better had there been other men in his life, in his
Yes.
life, you know,
Yeah.
and, and so this is the hope. This is the dream to turn the Antelope Valley into a reflection of heaven, you know.
Yes.
And I believe it could be done, you know.
I
And
agree.
and I'm gonna just stay on this path, man. I'm thankful, man. Before I gotta say this about you, man. You were just such a great dude. Just in talking to you, the first time I've talked to you in years, and we were talking about this upcoming video. You said, without me even asking, you said, I'll be your right hand man. And I was thinking, I was like, God, that had to be you that did that. Because, of course, that was something that I would want to ask. But for you to even offer it before I said it, I just knew that's God. That's how God works. And so,
100%.
brother, we definitely gonna talk, and I'm just looking forward to going forward with this. And I just think this is the first of many great conversations. And I just know that this is going to make a positive impact on the Antelope Valley.
I agree, and I just I can't, like I said, I can't wait to you. I know we're going to talk lot more offline, but I can't tell you the amount of ideas that are going on, and the people that we could connect with, to help, build our mission going forward. And um, you've given me so much credit during this interview. Give me 2 minutes to to thank you. What you're doing is not easy.
Mhm.
It is not easy. You're going up against, like I said, social media, stereotypes, all types of barriers that men go through, just as men in general. And I ain't talking about the guys out there who are fathers who are struggling. There's a man out there who just lost his job, and he's got to figure out how to tell his family how they're going to eat next week.
Mhm.
And there's just so many men who are screaming on the inside but aren't saying anything.
Yes.
And for you to step out and be willing to be the face of this conversation is kudos to you, to who you are as a man of God, as a father, as a husband. So, when I said, your right hand, that was an easy choice, because we are needed, you are needed, Community Fathers is needed, and I just know God is going to bless.
All right, sir. That sounds like a great note to end on, man. And I just thank you for, and I thank you. I almost broke out in prayer, man. But so, brother, I appreciate you, and let's do this, man.
I'm in. Hey,
All
thank you
right,
for
sir.
everyone. And I just hope this video is a blessing to anyone. And yeah, we big things coming for Community Fathers. Stay tuned.
All right. Talk to you soon, man.
All right, have a
Talk to
blessed
you.
one. Thanks, Hodges.
All right.